A friend and colleague once told me that when she reads fairy tales to her children as they grew up, and they're adults now, she would skip the happily ever after part. When the epic love at first sight between the princess and the prince would finally overcome whatever witches and thorny, dark forest, whatever's got in their way, when they get married, my friend would say, and it was a lot of work. The end. This always struck me as funny, but I feel like it also left me with a little nod of sadness in my gut when she told me, because telling children that difficult stories do not conclude with unending bliss is honest, right? But part of me wants children to be able to live in those happily ever afters. And what's even more likely to be true, I still want to believe in those happily ever afters. One part of me knows that no matter what, life is a lot of work, and being honest about it is the right thing to do at all times. But another part of me still wants to believe that if the connection is powerful at the beginning, it will be enough to sustain happiness forever. I think most of us can think of a time when we became devoted to something or someone quickly. We meet someone and we fall for them right away, or we visit a place and find that it feels more like home than the place where we grew up. We hear about a new idea and it feels like the missing piece of some long unfinished puzzle. When many people encounter this faith tradition, they have told me over and over again, they feel like they were you their whole lives and just didn't know it. That new love energy, that new devotion energy, that new commitment energy is powerful. And my sermon is unfinished because it literally just says, insert lesbian U-Haul joke here. Which my singers can resonate with today. There's a lot of queer ladies and people in this sanctuary right now. Something feels so right so quickly, we often want to throw ourselves into it fully, especially lesbians. Immerse ourselves in a new kind of workout, a new art form, a new lover. Many of us even let that part of us that wants to believe in happily ever after win out over the "and it was a lot of work" part, for a while at least. But sooner or later, every powerful new commitment hits a roadblock. We fight with our lover. We find the limits of our body or our skill. We hit simple exhaustion. We feel casual boredom. We experience complicated betrayal. Sooner or later, we wonder whether it's worth remaining devoted to that which used to light us on fire when we just feel tepid now. So I imagine that this is true of most career paths that are callings first and jobs second. But saying yes to the call to ministry can feel like falling in love, or maybe like getting married. It can feel like a commitment that will nourish one's brain and one's heart forever. And so in that time when that yes to commitment feels so glorious, when someone is early in their preparation for ministry, Episcopal priest Gwen Burens asks them, what are you going to do when the church breaks your heart? What are you going to do when the church breaks your heart? John Burens, who's Gwen's partner and is a UU minister and the former president of our national association, he tells this story often. It's come to be a question that I ask of congregants when they tell me they're considering going into the ministry, and I ask it of seminarians. And it's a question I return to regularly in my own ministry. What are you going to do when the church breaks your heart? In that moment of glorious yes, of joyful heart, we ask, what will you do when the inevitable heart pain arrives? And we ask this Because if you spend enough time in this faith tradition or any faith tradition, it will disappoint us, it will discourage us, and it will break our hearts. If we spend enough time in love or in community, if we spend enough time in any vocation, the simple and unavoidable messiness of human relationships means that our hearts will be broken. And if we enter into a commitment only ever thinking it will only bring us a joyful heart, it is doomed from the start. So my friends, I ask you this: what are you going to do when your lover breaks your heart? What are you going to do when your job breaks your heart, when your school breaks your heart? What are you going to do when your friends break your heart? What do we do when the world breaks our hearts? The poet, essayist, and feminist Adrienne Rich once wrote, "My heart is moved by all I cannot save. So much has been destroyed. I have to cast my lot with those who, age after age, perversely and with no extraordinary power, reconstitute the world." Every week, we find out that another one of our beloved fellow congregants is facing a frightening diagnosis or loss of a job or the loss of a loved one. Every week, we see children in our families and in our classrooms struggling to become their best selves when the world is going to just reward them for being bullies or distracted consumers. Every week, there's political corruption and gun violence, and our culture's failure to treat mental illness. Every week, there's misogyny and Every week now, for almost 2 years, the news about COVID has been dire. It's actually been longer than 2 years. I think we just didn't quite know it early on. There is much, and there are so many that we cannot save. So much has been destroyed. So much is being destroyed in our world. Disappointment pierces us through if we live long enough in this world. And I know that religious community has broken many of your hearts, and it has broken mine. Love has broken your hearts, and it has broken mine. The world has broken your hearts, and it has broken mine. When we love something or someone long enough to give it our devotion, we cannot save ourselves from heartbreak. And Adrienne Rich writes, "My heart is moved by all I cannot save." I admit, for me, when it feels like too much, when the world feels like too much, and it often feels like too much, my instinct is to shut my heart down. I don't want my heart to be moved. I want my heart to just stay put. And so sometimes I go through the motions of life without really being present to it. Sometimes when the suffering that I see tugs at my heart, I will avert my gaze, or I'll mindlessly retreat to social media or zone out in front of the TV. I'll do what it takes to wall my heart off and protect it from pain. We know that in the midst of trauma, that this is an important tool for us to be able to numb out and protect ourselves from pain. Numbing ourselves in the midst of trauma so that we can avoid disintegrating into the pain helps us to survive, at least until we can get to the other side of the trauma. There is a gift in that numbing ability, but we can't stay in that numbing place forever. And I've known this for a while, but I haven't spoken it aloud until the past couple of weeks. That in recent months, and maybe since the pandemic began, but maybe before the pandemic began, I've been shutting music out of my life because it makes me feel too much. And so I listen to lighthearted audiobooks while I drive or cook because they occupy my attention, but they don't move my heart, because being moved feels too vulnerable. Music feels dangerous because I know that if I surrender to beat and harmony and poetry, I'm inviting a demolition crew in to expose my tender heart again. The demolition crew is sitting right there and right over there here in the sanctuary today. But many of you know me pretty well. And if you ask me where I have encountered the deepest meaning in my life, where I have felt the most holy experience, where I have connected with God the most in my life, I will tell you unequivocally that the answer is music for me. How about you, my friends? Is there something that you are shutting out of your life right now to avoid letting your heart be moved? And I'm not asking you to type it into the chat because that's a pretty vulnerable thing to ask. But if you at this moment are realizing that there's something that you're shutting out of your life, I invite you to maybe write about it or talk to someone that you feel safe with about it in the coming week, because it sucks to hold it in. There will always be bad news. There's always so much that we cannot save, so many we cannot save. And it can feel safer to put up walls around our hearts and go through the motions of life without feeling it fully. Sometimes we can convince ourselves that walling up our hearts will keep them from being broken. But you know, and I know, that walling ourselves off just makes us a little bit less human, a little less kind, a little less joyful. Walling ourselves off might offer some protection, and sometimes we need that protection for a while. But if we wall ourselves off for the long haul, it comes at the cost of our ability to love. And so if we are to hold on to the preciousness of our humanity amidst this culture that encourages just numbness and distraction, we have to allow in the bad news, we have to seek out the good news. We have to let music shake down our walls and let not just disappointment pierce us through, but let beauty pierce us through. And so this is my first charge to those of us who seek to make meaningful, long-standing commitments in our lives. To make them last, we must allow our broken hearts to be moved. And here is the second charge: to cast our lot with those who age after age, perversely and with no extraordinary power, reconstitute the world. When we fall in love, when we find our community, when ideas light us up and vocations give us purpose, we are making a choice. We are casting our lot, and we are being chosen in return. But the rich and from devotion is not just about one choice to cast our lot. It's not just about that first choice. We must choose each other again and again, through good times and hard times, through conflict and through plenty. The hardest moments of life are the moments when we must choose each other, even when our hearts are the most broken. And so if you are thinking about the immortal words of Meatloaf, who we also lost this week, blessings upon your memory, Meatloaf, and you're thinking, I would do anything for love, but I won't do that. I want to say that I don't mean we should never end relationships or commitments or devotions, in times of abuse especially, and in times when our deepest truth and our truest integrity calls us into a new direction. Seeking repair or ending connections is what is needed. I'm not saying we shouldn't ever do that. But it's only when we choose each other again and again, not those who cause harm, but those who bring healing into the world, that we can cut through the shallowness of our culture that starves our souls. Choosing each other and choosing once more is the only way that we can become fully known and fully loved. So today, this afternoon, we are going to be voting on our revised congregational covenant after our worship service. And at the heart of what it means to covenant with one another is this charge. Covenanting means we make agreements about how we want to be with one another, knowing that we're not always going to succeed. And so covenanting is as much, if not much more, about coming back together after we have fallen short or fallen out of relationship. Covenanting is about the process of repair and restoration and forgiveness and healing that's essential when we choose one another again and again and aspire to being good to one another. And so my second charge to us who seek to make meaningful commitments last is, even in the midst of brokenheartedness, to cast our lot, to choose our people again and again and again, that we might reconstitute the world. Poet Yolo Akili writes, "Remember, oppression thrives off isolation. Connection is the only thing that can save us." He writes, "Remember, oppression thrives off of superficiality. Honesty about our struggles is the key to our liberation." He writes, "Remember, your story can help save someone's life. Your silence contributes to someone else's struggle. So speak so that we can all be free," he says. "Love so we can all be liberated. The moment is now. We need you." Speak so we can all be free. Love so we can all be liberated. The moment is now. We need you. My friends, oppression, whether we're talking about racism or classism or sexism or ableism or anti-Semitism or Islamophobia, anything else, oppression itself is designed to cut us off from one another. When we are divided and disheartened, when we repress our own stories and discount each other's stories, our commitments waver, and the work of dismantling injustice becomes massively more difficult. And so remember, oppression thrives off of superficiality. We must allow ourselves to be moved, to be deeply moved. Remember, oppression thrives off of isolation. We must choose one another, and we must choose one another again and again, connect deeply in the midst of brokenheartedness to reach that which is most holy. Friends, I know your hearts have been broken, and so have mine. The hearts of everyone who get a chance to live long enough in life at some point become broken. And when we look back on the commitments we have made in our lives, I think in particular about the prayers we lifted for Daniel and for Dolly, both who died in their 90s this year. Commitments they made in their lives, their long lives. I think when we look back, the most powerful moments, the things that shape who we are, come not from those first blissful yes moments. They come from the moments when we were most deeply moved, the times when we made the choice to do the hard work of saying we are sorry and of forgiving one another. The most important moments were the choices when we became more in touch with ourselves and more kind to one another. Those moments when we felt the freedom of speaking our truth and hearing another's liberatory truth as it made space for our own. The most powerful moments of our lives are those moments when we choose each other again and again when we could leave. Those moments when we were chosen again and again when others could have left us. Commitment doesn't mean happily ever after. Commitment is a lot of work. And so finally, my third charge to us today, us who seek to make meaningful commitments last, is to remember your story can help save someone's life. And so, my friends, speak of your brokenheartedness so we can all be free. Love through your healing so that we can all be liberated. May your hearts be moved. May you choose your people and be chosen by them again and again and again. May you tell your truth so that we can all be free. As Rabbi Menachem Mendel of Kotsk once wrote, "There is nothing more whole than a broken heart. There are no people more whole than the brokenhearted, and it will be a lot of work. But together, perversely and with no extraordinary power, may we reconstitute the world." The end. Amen. And blessed be.
Hi, I'm Reverend Hannah Capaldi.
And I'm Reverend Abbey Tennis. We are the ministers at the First Unitarian Church of Philadelphia, where our mission is to awaken love and justice in our lives and in the world.
We're so grateful that you watched, and we hope that the sermon connected with your soul.
We also want to invite you to join us for a live worship service every Sunday at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. You can always find the link to that service on our website at www.philauu.org. In these services, you'll hear words like you've just heard, and you also get a chance to greet one another, pray together, sing together, and we even hold a virtual coffee hour after services to get a chance to greet some new and old friends.
If you want to support the mission of this community and you feel moved to give, you can do so by going to the website that Reverend Abbey just mentioned. You can find that link below, or you can text 215-709-5095 and follow the prompts to give.
If someone in your life needs to hear these words today, we encourage you to share this video. And again, thank you so much for watching.
We hope to see you soon.